Keller, Courage in the Dark. Chapter 1. Helen Keller was born on June 27, 1827, 1880 on a farm in Alabama. Mr. and Mrs. Keller were thrilled with their beautiful, healthy baby. But then something trouble happened. When little Helen was a year and a half old, she became very sick. She had a high fever. Her parents were afraid that she would die. A few days later, the fever was gone. But something was still very wrong. Little Helen could no longer see or hear. The illness had left her blind and deaf. The killer's sweet little girl became a wild child. She kicked and scratched her parents when they tried to touch her. She yelled and screamed in a loud voice. How else could she let anyone know when she's hungry or tired or afraid? Mealtime was terrible for a Keller family. Helen stuck her hands into everyone's food. She threw things across a dinner table. Helen did whatever she wanted. Her parents could not make her behave. Once Helen walked in the middle of the night. Since she could not see, she thought it was morning. Mrs. Keller tried to put her daughter back to bed, but Helen insisted on getting up and getting dressed. Then she went into the kitchen. So it was nighttime. She screamed for her breakfast. Helen's parents did not know what to do. They wanted to help their little girl, but how? They did not know any blind or deaf people. They did not know where to turn for help. One day, Mrs. Keller heard about Dr. Chisholm. He was a special eye doctor in Baltimore, Maryland. Some of his patients were blind deaf, just like Helen. For the first time, Mrs. Keller felt a little bit of hope. Maybe Dr. Chisholm could help Helen. The Kellers took their daughter to Baltimore right away. Dr. Chisholm could not cure Helen, but he told the Kellers not to worry. He said that even a blind child could learn many things. He sent them to Washington to meet Alexander Graham Bell. Mr. Bell invented the telephone, and because his own wife and deaf, he knew a great deal about teaching deaf people. Mr. Bell told the Kellers about the Perkins Institution for the blind. The Perkins Institution was a special school in Boston, Massachusetts. One of its students was a girl named Laura Brickman. Like Helen, Laura was both blind and deaf. Teachers at Perkins taught her how to sew. Mr. Bell said that a teacher from Perkins might be able to help Helen. The Keller's household. Chapter 2. Mr. and Mrs. Keller write a letter to the Perkins Institution. A teacher wrote back. Her name was Anne Sullivan. Friends called her Annie. Annie agreed to come and live with the Kellers and teach Helen. Helen was now almost 7 years old. On March 3, 1887, Annie moved to Alabama. It will turn out to be the most important day of Helen's life. A child, Annie had been almost blind herself. Luckily, several operations helped her see again, but Annie never forgot what it was like to be blind. She hoped she would be able to help young Helen. Right away, Annie saw that Helen was a tall, pretty girl, but she also saw that Helen was not happy. She almost never smiled. Helen could not understand the words around her. She lived in darkness and silence. She could not tell people how she felt. No wonder she was so unhappy. At first, Helen was not a good student. She did not obey Annie. Helen was used to having her own way. Her parents had allowed her to act out. They never punished her. They thought she could not control her behavior. Annie had to teach Helen everything. She was very strict with her young students. Helen was strong and stubborn, but so was Annie. Sometimes Helen finished off hits Annie. When Helen hits her, Annie stopped her. Bits by bits, Helen learned to pay attention to her new teacher. Annie taught Helen many new things. She taught her to sit at the dinner table. She taught her to eat with a knife and fork and spoon. She taught her to dress herself and brush her hair. Annie wanted to teach her students something that was even more important. She wanted to teach young Helen how to understand words. At the Perkins Institution, Annie had to learn a special finger alphabet. Different hand positions stood for different letters. She could speak to deaf people by spelling out words with her hands. Helen had lost her sense of sight and her sense of hearing, but she still had her sense of touch. Annie tried to teach Helen the special alphabet. She spelled out one word after another inside Helen's hand. Helen copied Annie and repeated the finger movements. She learned how to spell doll, cake, milk, and mug. But she did not understand what the words meant. Annie tried over and over, but Helen still did not understand. One spring day, Annie and Helen went for a walk outside. Annie took Helen to a well. The teacher pumped some water and let it run over Helen's fingers. Slowly, she spelled out the words water into Helen's palm. Then she did it again and again. Suddenly, the little girl understood. The wet liquid and the word being spelled in her palm were the same thing, water. After that, Helen was quick to learn other words. One day, she learned 30 new words. Annie Sullivan was proud of her students. She could not believe how quickly Helen learned. Helen wanted to know everything. She had discovered the whole new exciting world. Annie called Helen wanted to know Annie called Helen's progress a miracle. Her accomplishments were amazing. She had done the impossible. Helen knew how to express her thoughts. For the first time, she was happy. The crying feet stopped. Whenever Annie taught her new words, Helen threw her arms around her teacher and kissed her. Chapter 3. In May 1888, Helen was ready for a new challenge. Shortly before her 8th birthday, she went to Boston with Annie. They went to Annie's old school, the Perkins Institution. There Helen learned to read Braille. Braille is a form of writing. It was invented in France by a blind man named Louis Braille. Patterns of phrase that stands for each letter of the alphabet. Using the Braille system, blind people can fill the letters with their fingertips. With his wonderful alphabet, Helen learned to read. Helen already loved words. Now she loved the story that words could tell. She read many books, and then, using a special Braille typewriter, she writes some stories of her own. There was so much that Helen could learn at the Perkins Institution. Soon she and Annie began to spend winters in Boston and summers at home in Alabama. When Helen was 10 years old, she met another teacher in Boston. Her name was Sarah Fuller. Sarah wanted to teach Helen how to speak. Until then, Helen could speak only with her fingers. She could talk only to people who understood the special hands language that Annie had taught her. Sarah wanted to teach Helen to speak with her mouth. First, Helen moved her hand over Sarah's face. She felt Sarah's lips and tongue when she spoke. Then Helen copied the movement. She tried to make sounds. Helen's first spoken sentence was, "It is warm." It took a long time for Helen to improve her speech. She had to practice very hard. At first, only Annie and Sarah could understand what Helen said. Annie had to repeat Helen's words so others could understand too. But Helen was determined to speak her own. She would not give up. Eventually, she learned how to speak more clearly. When Helen spoke, everyone listened. Helen learned something else at the Perkins Institution. She learned how to read people's lips. She could not actually see people's lips moving, but she could feel them with her fingers. By placing her hands on the lips and throat of a speaker, Helen could figure out what was being said.